The morning sun cast long shadows across the parking lot of Riverside Community College as Sarah Martinez pulled her small Honda into a space near the back. She preferred parking away from the main building. Finding the quiet walk helped clear her mind before classes. At 28, Sarah was older than most students, having returned to school after working various jobs since graduating high school. Her petite frame and soft-spoken manner made her nearly invisible in most social situations, which was exactly how she liked it. Sarah had enrolled in the college's nursing program 18 months earlier, driven by a desire to help people and build a stable career. She lived in a tiny apartment across town, worked nights at a grocery store to pay for tuition, and spent her days buried in textbooks. Her classmates often saw her eating lunch alone, headphones in, reviewing medical terminology or anatomy diagrams. She rarely spoke unless called upon, but when she did, her answers were always precise and thoughtful. The campus was buzzing with activity as Sarah walked toward the Health Sciences building. It was registration day for the spring semester, which meant long lines, frustrated students, and packed hallways. The college had grown significantly over the past few years, and the aging facilities struggled to accommodate everyone during peak times like registration. Inside the main hallway, Sarah joined the line for academic counseling. Students clutched course catalogs and printouts, many looking stressed about getting the classes they needed. The air conditioning struggled against the body heat of hundreds of people packed into spaces designed for much smaller crowds. Conversations echoed off the walls, creating a constant hum of voices, footsteps, and rustling papers. 3 people ahead of Sarah stood Marcus Thompson, a 22-year-old who had been taking classes on and off for 4 years. Marcus was well known around campus, though not necessarily for good reasons. At 6 feet tall with a muscular build from his job at a construction company, he commanded attention wherever he went. His voice carried across rooms, and he had opinions about everything. Students either gravitated toward his confident personality or went out of their way to avoid him. Marcus had failed several classes due to poor attendance and missed assignments, but he blamed his professors for being unfair. He was known for arguing with instructors, challenging grades he felt were too low, and making comments that made other students uncomfortable. Today, he was trying to register for classes he needed to graduate, but several were already full. The line moved slowly. What should have been a quick process was taking over an hour due to computer problems and understaffing. Students checked their phones, shifted their weight from foot to foot, and complained quietly to friends. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, adding to the general atmosphere of institutional frustration. Sarah stood quietly, reviewing her class schedule on her phone. She had mapped out her remaining coursework carefully, knowing that every semester counted. Her goal was to graduate in 2 years and start working as a registered nurse. The plan required taking specific classes in the right order, and missing even one could delay her graduation. Behind Sarah, 2 freshman girls chatted about their weekend plans. In front of her, an older man reviewed a thick folder of transcripts from previous colleges. The diversity of students was one of the things Sarah appreciated about community college. People of all ages and backgrounds working toward different goals, all sharing the common experience of trying to improve their lives through education. Marcus was growing increasingly agitated as the line crawled forward. He had been checking his phone constantly, texting someone about his frustration. His jaw was clenched, and he kept sighing loudly enough for everyone around him to notice. When he reached the front of the line, his conversation with the counselor could be heard by everyone nearby. "What do you mean anatomy is full?" Marcus's voice rose above the general noise. "I need that class to graduate this year." The counselor, a middle-aged woman named Mrs. Peterson, who had worked at the college for 15 years, maintained her professional composure. "I understand your frustration, Marcus, but we only have limited seats. There's a waiting list, or you could take it next fall." "Next fall?" Marcus slammed his hand on the counter. "That's ridiculous. I've been here longer than half these people. I should get priority." Mrs. Peterson explained the registration priority system based on units completed and academic standing. Marcus's irregular attendance and failed classes had affected his priority registration date. Students who maintained better academic records got to register earlier, which meant they had first choice of classes. The explanation only made Marcus angrier. "So you're punishing me for having to work full-time while these kids live off their parents' money?" The hallway had grown quiet as other students noticed the confrontation. Sarah glanced up from her phone, observing the situation with the careful attention she brought to everything. She had encountered people like Marcus before, quick to anger, always blaming external circumstances for their problems. Mrs. Peterson remained calm but firm. "I can put you on the waiting list for anatomy. Sometimes students drop during the first week, and spots open up." "Sometimes isn't good enough," Marcus shot back. "I need guarantees. This whole system is screwed up." Security guard James Wilson had been watching from across the hallway. At 55, James had worked campus security for 8 years and had seen every type of student conflict imaginable. He was a former military police officer who believed in de-escalation but was prepared to act if situations got out of hand. He began walking slowly in the direction of the counseling area. Marcus continued his tirade, his voice getting louder. "You people don't care about students who actually have to work for a living. You just want to collect tuition money and push everyone through the system." Other students in line were becoming uncomfortable. Some pulled out phones to record what was happening, while others moved slightly away from the counseling counter. Sarah remained in place, but her posture had changed subtly. Anyone trained to notice such things would have seen her weight shift slightly forward on her feet. Her hands moved to a more neutral position at her sides. The tension in the hallway was palpable. Mrs. Peterson had dealt with angry students before, but Marcus's aggressive tone and body language were escalating beyond normal frustration. She pressed a small button under her desk that would alert security, though James Wilson was already approaching. "Sir, I need you to lower your voice," Mrs. Peterson said firmly. "Other students are waiting, and I've explained your options. You can accept the waiting list placement or schedule an appointment to discuss alternatives." Marcus leaned forward across the counter. "Don't tell me to lower my voice. This is my education we're talking about. I pay tuition just like everyone else." Sarah noticed that Marcus's face was flushed red and veins were visible on his neck. His hands were clenched into fists, and his breathing had become rapid and shallow. These were signs of escalating aggression that she recognized from her studies in human behavior and psychology. James Wilson reached the area and positioned himself where Marcus could see him. "Is there a problem here?" he asked in a calm, professional tone. Marcus spun around, now facing both the security guard and the long line of students behind him. "Yeah, there's a problem. This place doesn't care about students." "I understand you're frustrated," James said, using the de-escalation techniques he had learned in training. "But we need to keep our voices down and work through this calmly." The hallway had become even quieter. Students were now openly watching the confrontation, many holding up phones to record. The situation had reached a tipping point where it would either be resolved peacefully or escalate dramatically. Marcus looked around at all the faces staring at him, his anger now mixed with embarrassment at becoming the center of attention. "Everyone's just standing there judging me," he muttered. Sarah could see that Marcus was reaching a decision point. People in high emotional states often made impulsive choices that they later regretted. His body language suggested he was about to either storm out or do something that would make the situation much worse. "Marcus," Mrs. Peterson tried one more time. "Let me print out the waiting list form for you. If you fill it out, I can call you if any spots open up." But Marcus was beyond reasoning. The combination of academic frustration, financial pressure, and now public embarrassment had pushed him past his ability to think clearly. He was breathing heavily, his hands shaking slightly with adrenaline. James Wilson had seen this pattern many times before. When someone got this worked up in a public setting, surrounded by witnesses, They often felt trapped between their anger and their embarrassment. Sometimes they chose to save face by escalating the situation even further. The crowd of students had grown as word spread through the building about the confrontation. What had started as a routine registration dispute was becoming the most dramatic thing to happen on campus in months. Everyone had their phones out now, ready to capture whatever happened next. Sarah remained motionless in line, but her mind was working quickly. She had noticed details about Marcus that others might have missed: the way he favored his right hand, the slight bulge of keys in his left pocket, the fact that his work boots had steel toes. She was mentally cataloging potential threats and escape routes, habits she had developed long before most people knew her name. Marcus turned back to Mrs. Peterson, his decision made. "You know what? Forget your waiting list. Forget this whole place. You people have no idea who you're messing with." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. James Wilson stepped forward, his hand moving to his radio. "Sir, I need you to step away from the counter and take a deep breath." But Marcus was already committed to his course of action. He had crossed the line from frustrated student to potential threat, and everyone in the hallway could feel the shift in energy. Sarah glanced around the crowd of students, noting how many people were present. The hallway was packed with registration day crowds, plus the additional people who had gathered to watch the confrontation. She estimated over 300 people were within sight of the counseling counter. The next few moments would determine whether this situation ended with Marcus walking away angry but harmless, or whether it would become something much more serious. The tension in the air was electric as everyone waited to see what would happen next. Marcus took a step back from the counter, his chest heaving with rage. The crowd of students instinctively moved back as well, creating a larger circle around the confrontation. James Wilson kept his hand near his radio, ready to call for backup if needed. Mrs. Peterson had quietly moved her chair back from the counter, putting more distance between herself and the increasingly volatile situation. "You have no idea what I've sacrificed to be here," Marcus said, his voice now carrying across the entire hallway. "I work 60 hours a week just to afford this place, and you people treat me like garbage." Sarah watched as Marcus's breathing became even more erratic. Sweat was forming on his forehead despite the air conditioning. His hands were opening and closing into fists repeatedly, a sign that his body was flooding with adrenaline and preparing for physical action. "Sir." "You need to calm down," James Wilson said, taking another step closer. "Let's walk outside and talk about this." Marcus spun around to face the security guard, his eyes wild with frustration. "Stop treating me like I'm crazy. Everyone here knows this system is broken, but nobody wants to admit it." Behind Marcus, the line of students had completely dissolved as people moved away from the confrontation. Sarah found herself in an awkward position. She was directly in Marcus's line of retreat if he decided to leave, but moving away now might draw his attention to her. "Marcus," Mrs. Peterson called out, her voice shaking slightly, "I can speak to my supervisor about your situation. Maybe we can find another solution." But Marcus was beyond hearing reasonable offers. His anger had reached the point where logical thinking was no longer possible. He turned back toward the counter, pointing an accusatory finger at Mrs. Peterson. "It's too late for that. You already showed me what you really think of students like me." The crowd continued to grow as students from other parts of the building heard about the commotion. Phone cameras were pointed at Marcus from every angle, recording his breakdown for social media and potential evidence. The pressure of being watched by so many people only added to his emotional state. Sarah noticed a girl near the front of the crowd whisper to her friend, "Someone should do something." But like most bystanders, they were frozen by the unpredictability of the situation. No one wanted to get involved in what might become violent. Marcus began pacing in the small area between the counter and the crowd. His movements were becoming more agitated, and he kept running his hands through his hair. James Wilson matched his movements, staying close enough to intervene but far enough away to avoid triggering an immediate confrontation. "You know what the problem is?" Marcus suddenly shouted, addressing the entire crowd. "Nobody cares about people who actually work for what they have. Everyone just wants to coast through life on someone else's money." A few students in the crowd exchanged uncomfortable glances. Marcus was making assumptions about their financial situations that weren't necessarily true, but challenging him seemed dangerous given his emotional state. Sarah recognized the speech pattern. Marcus was working himself up to justify whatever action he was planning to take. People often created narratives that made them feel righteous about poor decisions they were about to make. "This whole place is just a business," Marcus continued, his voice getting louder with each sentence. "They don't care if you learn anything. They just want your money, and then they want you gone." Mrs. Peterson tried once more to de-escalate. "Marcus, I understand you're upset, but threatening people isn't going to solve anything." "Threatening?" Marcus whirled around to face her. "I haven't threatened anyone. I'm just telling the truth about this place." But his body language was telling a different story. His shoulders were hunched forward aggressively, his stance was wide and confrontational, and his hands were clenched so tightly that his knuckles were white. James Wilson decided it was time to be more direct. "Sir, I need you to come with me. We can discuss this in my office where it's more private." Marcus laughed bitterly. "Private? So you can kick me out without all these witnesses seeing what really happened?" The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Marcus seemed to want the crowd as witnesses to his perceived injustice, not realizing they were also witnesses to his increasingly threatening behavior. Sarah checked her watch discreetly. The confrontation had been going on for nearly 15 minutes, and Marcus was showing no signs of calming down. If anything, the audience was feeding his need for drama and validation. "I've got just as much right to be here as anyone," Marcus declared, gesturing toward the crowd of students. "My money spends the same as theirs." A young man near the back of the crowd called out, "Dude, just take the waiting list and move on." The comment was meant to be helpful, but it had the opposite effect. Marcus zeroed in on the voice. "Easy to say when you don't have to worry about graduating on time to keep your job." The student who had spoken up immediately regretted getting involved. He tried to blend back into the crowd, but Marcus had already identified him as a target for his frustration. "Let me guess," Marcus said, pointing at the young man. "Mom and Dad paying for everything while you figure out what you want to be when you grow up?" "Hey, that's not fair," another student defended. "You don't know anything about his situation." Now Marcus had multiple people to direct his anger toward. His head swiveled between the students who had spoken, his breathing becoming even more rapid and shallow. Sarah realized that the situation was escalating beyond what campus security could handle alone. Marcus was feeding off the crowd's energy, and the crowd was growing larger and more vocal. It was a recipe for something seriously going wrong. James Wilson was thinking the same thing. He reached for his radio to call for backup, but the movement drew Marcus's attention. "What are you doing?" Marcus demanded. "Calling more people to gang up on me?" "I'm just doing my job," James replied calmly. "Let's not make this bigger than it needs to be." But Marcus was already convinced that everyone was against him. His paranoia was combining with his anger to create a dangerous emotional cocktail. "My job," Marcus repeated mockingly. "Easy job, right? Just hassle students all day and collect a paycheck." The insult hit home for James, who took pride in his work and genuinely cared about student safety. His professional demeanor remained intact, but Sarah could see his jaw tighten slightly. The crowd had grown to what Sarah estimated was over 300 people. Students were still arriving as word spread through the campus about the confrontation. Many were recording with their phones, creating a digital permanent record of whatever was about to happen. Marcus seemed to suddenly realize how many people were watching him. Instead of backing down, the attention seemed to energize him further. He was now performing for the crowd as much as expressing genuine frustration. "Look at all of you," he said, spreading his arms wide. "Just standing there watching like this is entertainment." Some students did look embarrassed at his comment. They lowered their phones and shifted uncomfortably, but no one left. The human instinct to witness drama was stronger than social embarrassment. Sarah noticed that Marcus had positioned himself with his back partially to the crowd, facing the counter and security guard. It was a defensive position that also gave him options if he decided to run or fight. Mrs. Peterson had been quietly speaking into her desk phone, presumably calling her supervisor or additional security. Marcus saw her movement and interpreted it as another betrayal. "More phone calls?" he said sarcastically. "How many people does it take to handle one student with a legitimate complaint?" The irony was that Marcus's legitimate complaint had been lost in his aggressive delivery. Several students in the crowd were actually sympathetic to registration problems, but his behavior had made it impossible to support him. James Wilson made a decision. The situation had gone on long enough, and Marcus was showing no signs of calming down. "Sir, you need to come with me now, or I'll have to call the police." The mention of police was the trigger Marcus had been unconsciously waiting for. In his mind, it confirmed that everyone was treating him like a criminal instead of addressing his concerns. "Police?" Marcus's voice cracked with disbelief and rage. "For asking about my classes? For disrupting the campus and refusing to follow directions," James clarified. Marcus took a step toward the security guard, his fists clenched at his sides. "You want to see disruption?" The crowd sensed the shift immediately. What had been an angry rant was about to become physical. Students near the front began backing away, while those with phones held them higher to get better angles. Sarah found herself in Marcus's direct path if he decided to retreat from the security guard. She could move to either side, but both directions would put her closer to the volatile situation. Her best option was to remain still and hope Marcus's attention stayed focused forward. James Wilson raised his hands in a calming gesture. "Nobody wants this to get physical, Marcus. Just take a breath and walk with me." But Marcus was beyond listening. His face was flushed red, veins bulging on his neck, and his whole body was trembling with adrenaline. The combination of academic pressure, financial stress, and public embarrassment had pushed him past his breaking point. "I'm not going anywhere," Marcus declared. "Not until someone explains why I'm being treated like garbage while everyone else gets whatever they want." The accusation wasn't fair. Every student had to follow the same registration process. But fairness was no longer part of Marcus's thinking process. Sarah watched as Marcus's right hand slowly moved toward his pocket. The movement was subtle, but her trained eyes caught it immediately. She couldn't see what, if anything, was in the pocket, but the gesture was concerning. James Wilson had noticed the same movement. His own hand moved to his belt, where he carried pepper spray and restraints. The situation was seconds away from becoming dangerous for everyone involved. Marcus pulled his hand back out of his pocket, revealing nothing more threatening than car keys. But the gesture had been aggressive enough to cause several students to gasp audibly. "See?" Marcus said, apparently pleased by the reaction. "Everyone thinks I'm some kind of monster just because I want to graduate." The victimization narrative was complete in Marcus's mind. He was the wronged party, and everyone else was conspiring against him. This kind of thinking often preceded the most serious confrontations. Sarah could see that James Wilson was preparing to take physical action. The security guard's stance had shifted to a more ready position, and his hand was hovering near his equipment. The moment of decision had arrived. Marcus could choose to walk away and salvage what was left of his reputation, or he could escalate the situation beyond the point of no return. Unfortunately, Marcus had already made his choice. With a sudden burst of movement that caught everyone off guard, he lunged not toward the security guard or the counselor, but toward the crowd of students behind him. His target seemed random, just the person closest to him who represented everyone he felt was against him. That person was Sarah Martinez, who had been standing quietly in what used to be the registration line. Marcus's hand shot out toward Sarah's shoulder, his face contorted with rage as he screamed, "Maybe you people will pay attention now!" But Sarah was not the helpless victim Marcus expected to find. In the split second between his decision to grab her and his hand making contact, she moved with precision and speed that stunned everyone watching. Her left hand intercepted his reaching arm while her right hand secured his wrist. In one fluid motion that took less than 2 seconds, she stepped to the side, rotated his captured arm, and applied controlled pressure to his elbow joint. The sharp crack of Marcus's arm breaking echoed through the silent hallway, followed immediately by his scream of pain and shock. The hallway erupted into chaos the moment Marcus's arm snapped. His scream of pain cut through the air like a knife, causing several students to cry out in shock and others to stumble backward. Marcus collapsed to his knees, clutching his broken arm against his chest, his face pale and twisted in agony. Sarah immediately released her grip and stepped back, her hands returning to a neutral position at her sides. Her expression remained completely calm, showing no emotion despite having just defended herself against an assault. The contrast between her composed demeanor and Marcus's writhing form on the floor was stark and unsettling. James Wilson was the first to recover from the shock. He rushed forward, speaking into his radio as he moved. "Security to Health Sciences Building, Code Blue. We need medical and police response immediately." The crowd of students stood frozen in disbelief. Many still had their phones raised, having captured the entire incident on video. What they had witnessed was so quick and clinical that some weren't even sure what had happened. One moment, Marcus was lunging at the quiet nursing student, and the next moment he was on the ground with a broken arm. Mrs. Peterson had emerged from behind the counseling counter, her face white with shock. In 15 years of working at the college, she had never seen anything like this. "Oh my God," she whispered, staring at Marcus writhing on the floor. Sarah knelt down beside Marcus, her nursing training taking over. "Don't try to move your arm," she said quietly. "You're going into shock. Try to take slow, deep breaths." Marcus looked up at her with a mixture of pain, confusion, and fear. "What did you do to me?" he gasped. "You grabbed me and I defended myself," Sarah replied matter-of-factly. "Your arm is broken, but it's a clean fracture. The paramedics will be here soon." Some students in the crowd began whispering among themselves. "Did you see how fast that was? She didn't even look angry. How did she know how to do that?" James Wilson was coordinating the emergency response while keeping an eye on both Sarah and Marcus. He had seen many confrontations in his years of security work, but this was unlike anything in his experience. The nursing student had neutralized a much larger aggressor in seconds, with surgical precision. Within minutes, paramedics arrived on scene. They immediately began treating Marcus for shock and pain while preparing to transport him to the hospital. Police officers followed close behind, beginning the process of documenting what had happened. Detective Maria Santos was the investigating officer assigned to the case. A 20-year veteran of law enforcement, she had dealt with thousands of assault cases, but this one presented some interesting questions. 314 witnesses meant there would be no shortage of evidence, but understanding exactly what had occurred would require careful analysis. "I need everyone to remain calm and stay where you are," Detective Santos announced to the crowd. "We'll be taking statements from witnesses, starting with those who were closest to the incident." Sarah remained standing near where Marcus was being treated by paramedics. She had not attempted to leave or blend into the crowd, which impressed Detective Santos. Most people involved in violent incidents, even in self-defense, showed some signs of emotional distress. Sarah appeared completely composed. "Are you injured?" Detective Santos asked Sarah. "No, I'm fine," Sarah replied. "He grabbed my shoulder and I responded to defend myself." "Can you describe exactly what happened?" Sarah gave a clear, concise account of the incident. Her description was factual and unemotional, focusing on Marcus's actions and her response. She made no attempt to justify or explain beyond the basic facts. Detective Santos was experienced enough to recognize that Sarah's calm demeanor and precise movements weren't typical of an average college student. "Have you had training in self-defense or martial arts?" "Yes," Sarah answered simply. "What kind of training?" "Mixed martial arts, primarily focused on defensive techniques." The detective made notes, but decided to pursue Sarah's background more thoroughly later. First, she needed to interview other witnesses and establish exactly what had led up to the confrontation. James Wilson provided a detailed account of Marcus's escalating behavior and threats. Mrs. Peterson described the registration dispute that had triggered Marcus's anger. Dozens of students gave consistent statements about witnessing Marcus lunge at Sarah and her quick defensive response. The video evidence from student phones was overwhelming. Multiple angles showed Marcus grabbing Sarah aggressively and her immediate, precise response. The footage clearly supported a claim of self-defense, but it also raised questions about the level of force Sarah had used. Dr. Elizabeth Hayes, the college president, arrived as Marcus was being loaded into the ambulance. She had been contacted by security and was deeply concerned about the incident's impact on campus safety and the college's reputation. "How is the injured student?" Dr. Hayes asked Detective Santos. "He has a broken arm and is in shock, but he'll recover. The more interesting question is how a nursing student was able to neutralize him so effectively." Dr. Hayes looked over at Sarah, who was calmly answering questions from another officer. "I don't believe we have any record of her having martial arts experience." As the immediate crisis was being handled, Detective Santos began digging deeper into Sarah's background. What she found was both impressive and surprising. Sarah Martinez had served in the United States Marine Corps for 6 years before enrolling at Riverside Community College. She had been trained in Marine Corps martial arts program techniques and had achieved a black belt level of proficiency. Her military occupation specialty had been hospital corpsman, which explained her calm demeanor under pressure and her decision to pursue nursing. But Sarah's military service went deeper than basic training. She had served 2 deployments in Afghanistan as part of a female engagement team, working directly with local women and children in dangerous areas. Her training included advanced hand-to-hand combat, emergency medical treatment, and high-stress decision-making. After leaving the Marines, Sarah had deliberately chosen to keep a low profile. She was dealing with mild PTSD and found that avoiding attention helped her manage anxiety. Her plan was to complete her nursing degree quietly and build a peaceful civilian career helping people heal rather than fighting. When Detective Santos learned about Sarah's background, the incident made much more sense. "So you're telling me that when this young man grabbed her, he unknowingly assaulted a trained Marine with combat experience?" "That appears to be the case," Dr. Hayes replied after reviewing Sarah's academic records, which now included her military transcripts. "She never mentioned her service during the admissions process, which she had no obligation to do." The irony was profound. Marcus had chosen to attack the one person in a crowd of over 300 who was uniquely qualified to defend herself. His random act of aggression had targeted someone with years of professional training in exactly this type of situation. News of the incident spread quickly through the campus and local community. Social media videos of the confrontation went viral, generating millions of views and thousands of comments. Most people were amazed by Sarah's quick thinking and precise response to defend herself. Marcus was treated at the hospital and released the same day with his arm in a cast. He was arrested and charged with assault, though his lawyer argued that his emotional state and the severity of his injury were mitigating factors. During the investigation, more details about Marcus's behavior emerged. Several students came forward to report previous incidents where he had been verbally aggressive or made them uncomfortable. His academic record showed a pattern of blaming others for his failures rather than taking responsibility for his actions. Sarah's response to the media attention was characteristic of her personality. She declined all interview requests and asked for privacy to continue her education. A brief statement released through the college's public relations office expressed her regret that the situation had escalated to violence and her hope that Marcus would recover quickly. The legal proceedings were straightforward. Video evidence from dozens of phones clearly showed Marcus initiating physical contact and Sarah responding with appropriate defensive force. His assault charge resulted in a plea bargain that included anger management counseling and community service. Marcus eventually dropped out of Riverside Community College, unable to handle the combination of his legal troubles and the notoriety from the viral videos. He later enrolled in online classes at a different institution, avoiding the campus environment that had triggered his breakdown. The college administration used the incident as an opportunity to improve their crisis response procedures and provide additional training for staff dealing with agitated students. They also implemented a policy requiring security cameras in all high-traffic areas to supplement the witness testimony and phone videos that had been crucial in this case. For Sarah, the incident was both a disruption and a revelation. The unwanted attention forced her to confront her desire to remain invisible and helped her realize that her military skills could be an asset rather than something to hide from. Several of her classmates approached her after the incident, expressing admiration for her calm response and asking about her background. For the first time since starting college, Sarah began forming genuine friendships with other students. Her professors were impressed by how she handled the situation and the media attention afterward. Dr. Rebecca Thompson, her anatomy instructor, noted that Sarah's military medical training made her an exceptionally skilled student who could handle high-pressure situations that rattled other nursing students. "What I find remarkable," Dr. Thompson later said, "is not just that she defended herself effectively, but that she immediately switched to providing medical care for the person who had just attacked her. That takes exceptional character and training." Sarah's academic performance actually improved after the incident. The confidence she gained from successfully handling a crisis situation helped her become more engaged in class discussions and clinical rotations. Her military experience, which she had tried to downplay, became an asset in her nursing education. The viral videos led to unexpected opportunities. Sarah received scholarship offers from several universities with nursing programs, impressed by her composure under pressure and her military background. A veterans organization also reached out to offer support and networking opportunities. After careful consideration, Sarah decided to accept a scholarship to transfer to a 4-year university with a highly regarded nursing program. The incident had taught her that trying to hide her capabilities and experience wasn't necessary or healthy. Detective Santos closed the case with a recommendation that no charges be filed against Sarah. Her report noted that Sarah had used minimum necessary force to defend herself against an unprovoked attack, and that her military training had actually prevented the situation from becoming much worse. "In my opinion," Detective Santos wrote, "Ms. Martinez's quick, controlled response prevented what could have been a much more serious incident involving multiple injuries and greater trauma for everyone present." The 314 witnesses to the confrontation had seen something remarkable. Not just a person defending herself, but a demonstration of how proper training and emotional control could resolve a dangerous situation with minimal harm. Marcus's broken arm would heal in 6 weeks, but the lessons from the incident would last much longer. Sarah graduated from her nursing program 2 years later with highest honors. She now works as an emergency room nurse, where her ability to remain calm under pressure and her combat medical training make her invaluable during critical situations. The incident at Riverside Community College became a case study used in campus security training programs across the country. It demonstrated the importance of de-escalation techniques, the unpredictability of student mental health crises, and the reality that people aren't always what they appear to be on the surface. Marcus eventually completed his degree through online studies and found work in construction management. The anger management counseling required by his plea agreement helped him develop better coping strategies, and he never again faced assault charges. The 314 students who witnessed the incident learned something valuable about assumptions and the danger of letting emotions override judgment. Many later said it changed how they approached conflicts in their own lives, remembering the stark difference between Marcus's explosive reaction and Sarah's controlled response to a threatening situation. The hallway where the confrontation occurred was renovated the following year with improved lighting and security cameras. A small plaque near the counseling center reminds students about the importance of treating everyone with respect and seeking help when academic stress becomes overwhelming. Sarah's story spread beyond the immediate incident, inspiring other veterans to pursue education and careers in helping professions. Her example showed that military training could be successfully channeled into civilian service, and that sometimes the most capable people are the ones who choose to remain quietly in the background. The incident taught everyone involved that appearances can be deceiving, that proper training can prevent tragedy, and that how someone responds under pressure reveals their true character. In less than 2 seconds, Sarah Martinez had demonstrated all 3 lessons to 314 witnesses who would never forget what they saw.